Brooklyn, Brother Ray.
Hold up.
I'd like to welcome everyone to the Brooklyn William Mackey Jr. History Club. We meet here every other Wednesday in honor of William Mackey Jr., Brother Hassan, Gil Noble, Louis Ray Rivera, Professor Dr. Amos Wilson, El Howard Malik Al-Shabazz, Minister Khalid, Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, Professor Edmund Scobie, and all the historians that gave up fame and fortune, burning the midnight oil because they believed in bringing history and information to the global black community. And we never want these people to be forgotten. That's why we meet in honor of William Mackey Jr. So give yourself a big hand. Hey! And for the people that came out into the live presentation to support the Brooklyn William Mackey Jr. History Club, give yourself a great hand. Hey! Now we're going to bring the camera over to the Amos collection. We have these books to help survival in African world info systems, to keep the great work of Amos Wilson alive. We have Blueprint for Black Power. We have The Psychology of Self-Hatred and Self-Defeat toward a Reclamation of the African Mind. We have Black on Black Violence, the psychodynamic of black self-annihilation in service of white domination. And the most important thing about this book is you hear every big city mayor, every politician, every fake and phony talking about black on black violence and what we do to each other and how it's out of control and criminal and this and that. But they never mention the great work of Amos Wilson's classic, Black on Black Violence, the psychodynamics of black self-annihilation in service of white domination. And when you read this book, you will understand the trick bag that we have put ourselves into. We got Amos Classic, The Falsification of African Consciousness. And after you read that book, you can spot a phony politician and a faker 3 blocks away before he gets to you. And Amos wrote that book years ago. The Developmental Psychology of the Black Child. I'm rereading Issues of Manhood in Black and White, an exclusive look with the masculinity and the societal definition of the African male, and that's an excellent book. Awakening the Natural Genius of Black Children. African-centered consciousness versus the New World Order. And you hear so much about the New World Order and African consciousness. You hear that. You hear so much about the New World Order, and you hear it all the time. Amos wrote this book many moons ago. Revealing the Unspeakable Bible Verses by Earl Ponder. The Truth About Judaism, Christianity, and Islam and the Holy Trinity. He left us too soon, and he had a whole bunch of books. Confronting the Color Crisis of the African Diaspora. Este Damiana, Distorted Truths and the Bastardization of African Cosmology. And this classic, in honor of our good friend Louis Ray Rivera, who come out of Martian Project, knew my whole family. And when Professor Mackey left us, Louis Ray Rivera took over the mantle. And he would come down here at the Mackey's group, and he would speak for hours. And we would close down and walk him home, and he still would talk for another hour and a half. Unbelievable. In honor of Louis Ray Rivera, Jazz in Jail. Now I have a couple of other books we have. Sister Carol Alexander, The Unspoken Truth About Racial Divide, White Rage, excellent. In honor of Dr. Randy Short, The Impact of Religious Slavery Revealed, and Dr. Randy Short did a program on Thorough Black Talk with Tad, Keisha, and Ashe, and it's on YouTube. He's a bad man, and he come out of D.C. He knows the goods on everybody. We have, I picked this up, The Lost Jews, Last of the Ethiopian Philosophers, and I found this when they was coming out with that DVD, Negroes and Hebrews, and there's some strange stuff going on with that. Also, in honor of Big Harold, he did a lecture here and he mentioned this book, The Transfer Agreement, the untold story of the secret pact between the Third Reich and Jewish Palestine by Edwin Black, in honor of Brother Harold. Theodore Allen, The Invention of the White Race, The Origin of Racial Oppression in Anglo-America, excellent publication. Charles Hamilton Houston, and the Struggle for Civil Rights. This book is called Groundwork. You got a lot of people capitalizing on civil rights. I call them silver rights. Charles, and they ain't pay no dues. But this book on Charles Hamilton Houston lays out a lot of that. In honor of Dr. Ben. They didn't have too many computers at this time. Black Man of the Nile and His Family. Big book in honor of Dr. Ben. Excellent. Our sister, Cynthia McKinney. You got a lot of people down in Georgia, people claim that they care about the people of Georgia. But in my personal opinion, the only person that cares about the people from Georgia is Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney. And them same folks that's running around down there with their nonsense conspired and removed her from office. And she wrote a book, When China Sneezes, From the Coronavirus Lockdown to the Global Political Economic Crisis. Cynthia McKinney, this is an excellent. The Irritated Genie, Ayo Kamati, War Near Rising, Jews Are the Problem, World War III, COVID, media censorship, food shortages, and economic collapse. This is a very small read at the Irritated Genie, but the research on this is impeccable. And he just came out with this book, so. And the real Anthony Fauci, Bill Gates, Big Pharma, and the Global War on Democracy. You really want to know what's going on? You read the real Anthony Fauci and Dr. Joseph McCullough and Ronald Cummings, The Truth About COVID-19, Exposing the Great Reset, Lockdown, and Vaccine Passports and the New Norm. And from what I understand, Robert Kennedy Jr. is running for president. And he is getting my vote. I was going to vote for the Trumpster, but I changed my mind when he started running. Edward Down used to be an analyst for BlackRock Investment, the #1 investment giant in the world. BlackRock and Vanguard. Sudden causes unknown, an epidemic of sudden death in 2021 and 2022. This book talks about all the people that just drop it. Like a snake venom hits you and they just drop like flies, and it's still happening. But Edwin Black, all these were bestsellers. So we have these books. Now I'm gonna bring you some community events, information to the global community, so you can do your own research. You can have things to look into and see what's going on with information to the global community, global black community. Tomorrow, Thorough Black Talk with Tad, Keisha, Brother Ashe, Brother Black, and Sister Marcia on YouTube Live Thursday at 8 o'clock, and also on Facebook. That's one of the hottest shows on the East Coast. Also, our Philadelphia family, Sister Empress Chi, and the Million Women's March, Blog Talk Radio, that comes on every Saturday at 10:30. And the telephone number is 1-319-527-6189. And she will let you know what's going on in Philly with Momia, the Move Organization, Sister Pam Africa, and Sister Empress. She is doing it up while everybody's trying to get their groove on a Saturday night, moving and grooving. Sister Empress Tree is laying it down. So we want to salute our Philadelphia connection. Io Kamati, every Monday at 10 o'clock on Sankofa Radio, Sankofa Revolutionary Radio, WSYP, 95.1 FM out of Birmingham, Alabama. Brother Anthony Mohammed, Io Kamati Live. That program comes on, you Google it, and you can actually call in and get in on the conversation. He's out of Washington, D.C., where all the stuff is happening. Also, our Baltimore family, Brother Darren Muhammad, State of the City, Glen Burnie, 1590 a.m., Saturdays at 12 o'clock. Also on Instagram under State of the City, Darren Muhammad, and he comes on Wednesday and Thursday on Facebook. So Darren Muhammad is our Baltimore connection, and he's laying it down. He's a bad man. You take what you leave, the rest you leave it where you want. Also, every Tuesday at 7 p.m., Your Immunity Project with Dr. Aline. That comes on at 7 o'clock. Also, they have California Radio. If you Google Your Immunity Project, it will tell you when that program comes on, and Dr. Aline is laying down some good stuff, so that's another excellent program. Also, every Friday at 8 o'clock, our Newark, New Jersey connection, African Echoes, Brother Trust Graham and the African Echo Study Group. That comes on at 8 o'clock on Fridays, and they're doing the psychology of self-hatred and self-defeat toward a reclamation of the African mind. And when you get on that study group with Trust, True, and them guys that knew it, you're going to get a whole nother perspective on study. Trust is laying it down. Also, on Saturdays, I believe 1:30, Brother True and the good brothers out of Asbury Park, the Know Thyself Study Group. That comes on, I think, 1:30. Trust Graham is also the moderator of that group, and they're doing the Destruction of Black Civilization by Chancellor Williams. If you're on, Brother True is on, he will put the information in the chat. And you can log on to those two study groups, and they laying it down. Also, the Simotap organization with Brother James McIntosh, Richard Dean, Theodore, Richard Dean, and Sister Betty Dobson.
Okay. I'm watching the video.
Okay, can you mute yourself there, please? Thank you.
I'm on my way out.
Okay. The Simotap organization, you have the Minefield program on 99.5 WBAI, and Brother James McIntosh did an excellent presentation today on Philadelphia and the things with Momia and the Move organization. So that's WBAI 99.5. And any other, can you mute yourself, whoever's talking? And any other information you want to know about the Simotap organization, you Google Simotap, and Dr. James McIntosh will lay down everything that's going on. Also, Manhattan Neighborhood Network Community Cop Program. That comes on Tuesdays at 5 o'clock, and it just started back yesterday, so you'll be seeing that program. Mike Graves, Noel Leda, and Julian Harper. They did an excellent program yesterday, so they're back on the block, and we want to give them a great big hand. Also, you can view all the Brooklyn William Mackey Jr. History Club lectures under YouTube titled BK William Mackey Jr. History Club, and all our lectures would come on, and you could watch them at your leisure, study them, go over whatever the speakers have have to say, whatever you don't believe, you always do your research. And the community cop programs, all the community cop programs, you go on Community Cop on YouTube, and for the years that Mike and them has been putting the program on, you can go into them, do your research, do your study, whatever, that's what you do. Whatever you don't believe, you study it yourself. Okay, Saturday, April 22nd, salute to Mumia Abu Jamal. They're going to be leaving and going to, a bus is leaving Alphabet City on 5th Street and Avenue C, and they're going out to Philadelphia to support Mumia because
they're going to have two events. One is at the restaurant on Saturday.
Okay, at the restaurant on 5th Street and Avenue C, they're going to have a salute to Mumia. Also, the Philadelphia salute to Mumia is the next day, Sunday, and that's going to be at the restaurant?
No. You meet at 17th Street, get on the van and ride to Philadelphia.
Okay, so they got a van leaving 17th Street in Manhattan, 8:30, 17th and where? Okay, 17th, and they're going to be leaving and going to Philadelphia to support. If you go on WBAI, they would have a little bit more information on that. And Mumia will be 69 years young on 4/24/23. So we have this information for the people in the community to look into and do your study and see what's going on. Ladies and gentlemen, if you wasn't here last week, our good friend Dr. Monderson did an excellent program on Egypt and the workings that went on during the great dynasties and how these kings and emperors, what they had to go through. And there's a lot of stuff we don't even know about on when you look at the pyramids and everything. How did these civilizations survive? What was the way that these kings were able to hold on and study? You can view that lecture, but we had to bring him back for a part 2. Ladies and gentlemen, give a great big hand to our keynote speaker, Dr. Monderson.
My brother. Hey, great. Good afternoon, family. It's wonderful to be back. There's so much that we have to present. I want to say that I want to thank Dr. Mackey for inviting me, but when I heard about him about a year or so ago, I said I have to investigate this brother. And he proved to be more than I expected. So I want to give a big salute to Dr. Mackey, Dr. Rere, because he's keeping the tradition alive.
Amen. Amen.
I know some people will say that I look young, but I am one of the last of the old timers. The great Africanists coming out of New York especially. I'm proud to have been admonished to continue the struggle, to liberate our people, to research and provide information that is for the benefit of all our young and our seniors.
Amen.
Last week I tried to give you some indication about who I am. Pardon me, I have to get my bicycle because I don't ride so well. There it is. Most of you know very little about me, but I'm happy to share some of my accomplishments.
Amen.
As a youngster, of course, I met Dr. Ben. I gave him his name. I come out of the Hunter College School with Dr. Clark and Marifa Ani and Dr. Ben and Professor Simmons and what have you. Let me give you some insights into some of my work. Of course, I wrote, in my early research, I heard about Cephalus Petrie. He was the father of Egyptian archaeology. And the editor of the ISIS magazine, the name will come to me in a minute, but Petrie had 1,200 published pieces, and this other guy had 1,500. And as a youngster, I dedicated myself to reach those high plateaus in published works. So I wrote more than 1,000 pieces for the Daily Black newspaper in Brooklyn. Fortunately, they never paid me a dime, but I didn't do it for the money. I did it to give my people, as my mother had admonished me to do. So back in 2008, I wrote this salute to Dr. Ben, and in 1997, I've written some serious papers that were pivotal in the overall black struggle. So I wrote Black History, Black Solidarity Day, History and Vision. I wrote this in 97. It was published in the Daily Child. I was interviewed back in 97 where I showcased my mother and my grandmother, who were the earliest Pan-African internationalists in our family. So I continue that tradition, and hopefully my family will do also. In 1992, I wrote the Afrocentric response to the invasion of Somalia to find General Adib, and I suggested that we shouldn't go in, let the UN, let the OAU handle that matter. It proved to be a failure. I wrote the Obama Doctrine, and there's more to it than that. The mystical nature of African spirituality, and much more. Black Egypt and the struggle for inclusion, the architecture of ancient Egypt, Dick Gregory, Callous in My Soul, and much more. I'm always looking for information that would make me a better analyst and a better thinker. G2AC always said to me, Fred, try to be an independent thinker. Think for yourself and form your own opinion based on your complete survey of the entire picture of any situation. I'm sure you're familiar with Steven Spielberg, the movie producer. He said, sometimes I see things differently than I saw them in the past. So that's natural that as you grow and elevate yourself, you begin to see things different next week than you did last week. The First Lady Jill Biden was on television, and she was asked, how do you influence your husband? And she said to him, I simply tell him what I hear the people are saying. When I have heard so much negativity directed towards Barack Obama, it's amazing. Everyone has their own opinion. I'm reminded when Reverend Sharpton encountered Tawana Brawley, and Tawana said, "Sir, those 5 men raped me." Reverend Sharpton saw a black woman, young black woman in distress, and he came to her assistance, and he was vilified, but he stood up for blackness. Back in, I think it was '07, I was watching the debates, and Hillary said that Obama wasn't fit to lead. So I wrote this book called Barack Obama, Ready, Fit to Lead. It was a small book, I didn't hope to go very far with it. But I realized here was a black man who was elected not as Pope, but as President of the United States. And he was vilified before, during, and after. And I took it upon myself to see this man who, one of these, referred to Obama as the nigger in the White House. What he did is that he put Obama in the category of all of us. Obama did business white, but he slept with a black woman. At the end of every trying day, he would go home to Michelle. Michelle is the daughter of enslaved Africans. And just like Jill Biden tells her husband, Michelle would say, "Listen, my people out there suffering." And he did what he could do because of the fact that he was hamstrung from day one. And you know the story, but if you don't know the story, so after this book, Barack Obama, Ready, Fit to Lead, I wrote this one called Obama, Master of Washington, D.C. And as things unfolded and so forth and so on, and he was re-elected, I wrote this one also called Obama, Master and Commander. And then at the end of his term, I was looking for this book all day, I couldn't find it. At the end of his term, I wrote a 4th volume called Obama, The Journey Completed. What I did show, and if you want to be aware of how this man that Munafi Asante said that they were lynching Obama, then you can chronologically consult these books to show you what Republicans did to Obama. But guess what? Obama's out there somewhere in a hammock, drinking pina coladas, virgin pina coladas on the beach with sand between his feet, while the other guy is struggling to stay above water. I wrote down back in 2000, and this was a part of my PhD dissertation, I wrote a set of books to Mike Tyson when he was first arrested. Somebody said, Carson, somebody don't write that guy and teach him black history. So I wrote these 10 poems praising great blacks for Mike Tyson. Had nothing to do with him. I was saying, listen, in essence, listen here, brother, you can be in there for a long time. Start reading up on black history. And then when I was finished, I wrote at least 7 letters, which I showed you last week, called 7 Letters to Mike Tyson on Ancient Egyptian Temples. So the point is that I've been doing some work, keeping up with the Joneses, so that our people can be educated and edified about my experiences as a researcher, as a writer, a columnist, an Africanist. Dr. Mark said, "Brother Fred, we know that you're a warrior. You have nothing to apologize for." Last year, I wrote the Diaspora Declaration. It's online somewhere. It was published in 3 African countries, which is saying that Mother Africa needs to welcome back her children that are astray in the New World. Recently, Kevin Hart, the actor, comedian, or what have you, he was trying to get into Egypt, get on TV, and they blocked him. The people who are in control of Egypt today would not let Kevin Hart get on TV and say, this is our culture. But who knows what he knows about ancient Egypt? I've been doing my research more than 45 years, thanks to the inspiration of Dr. Ben, Professor Simmons, and what I learned from Ben, Clark, Dr. Leonard James. So, having said that much is an introduction, my topic today is the coronation of the king of Egypt. Last week I dealt with the king in dynastic Egypt from the beginnings to the, I generally stop at the 25th dynasty, which is the period of the Ethiopians on the Piante, Shabaka, Shabatapa, Tanyatiman, and so forth. But today I want to focus on the coronation. How we have an individual elevated to godship to run a state. You have to bear with me because there's a lot of stuff I want to throw your way, okay? So the coronation of the king of Egypt was perhaps the most significant of all events, bar none, in that ancient African country. Accordingly, Chouala de Lubis, he was a Frenchman, in his book Sacred Science, The King of Pharaonic Theocracy, he noted that the coronation does not take place at any moment whatsoever. Its date is always situated so as to conform astrologically with the characteristic features this king will represent in generating his particular phase of Egyptian pharaonic Egypt. That is to say, the coronation generally coincides with new beginnings, such as the start of the new year, an important festival, or the beginning of the agricultural season. Of course, there is the need to hurry. So if the old king dies in January, to wait until November, December is too long to wait. Nonetheless, and reaffirming its divine connection, Chouala reminded, the king never carried out an act whatsoever, be it civil proceedings or a temple matter, without asserting that it is the Netta, the God force, with which is his inspiration, or realizes the work. With respect to her oddness, for instance, Queen Hatshepsut certifies to have done nothing but what was dictated by Amun, the principal god of the new kingdom. She has executed her commandments through and for Amun. That is, the king always says he was instructed by such and such a divinity to create and construct such and such a project. First, the primary function of the king was as an intermediary between the gods and humanity. His role was to maintain cosmic harmony, which meant he had to promote Ma'at, and Ma'at meant good, truth, justice, balance, order, righteousness, and yet to banish Isfet. Isfet was evil, chaos, pestilence, disorder, disequilibrium, which threatened Egypt, resulting in blighting agricultural endeavor. This is their belief. Again, you cannot seek, as I tried to explain in the last time, to seek to understand what's going on in ancient Egypt is to do a double back flip before you can move forward. So you cannot project yourself into the minds of these people who lived so many thousand years ago. What you could do is seek to learn from them, because they first wrote on the tabula rasa. What's a tabula rasa? A tabula rasa is an empty blackboard. And they were the first people to write on that blackboard and create the foundations of all forms of knowledge. So your job in association with that experience is to learn what you can and save your criticisms, because for the most part you're probably wrong if you see things through these 21st century spectacles. So, see, Theophile Bangma, Dr. Diop's research associate, in his book, African Philosophy, the Pharaonic Period, 2780 to 330 BC, writes, the Pharaoh in his capacity as guarantor of man. You don't have that today. He guaranteed goodness in the society. Everybody's pulling in a different direction today. Was naturally the supreme lord of the country. He was responsible for the maintenance of universal harmony. In that harmony, if that harmony got ruptured, the entire country fell in prey to terrible crises in the form of tremendous upheavals and terrible psychological, economic, and cultural troubles. In this, he references the lamentations of Aipua. Aipua was a nobleman who advised the king during the first intermediate period. And last time, 2 weeks ago, I gave you the breakdown of the dynasties, the periods, and so forth. So, at the end of the Old Kingdom, because of disorder, weak leadership, and what have you, we enter into the first intermediate period lasting from 7 through 10 dynasties. So Aipua is speaking to the king, and he reflects on events that brought about and followed the Old Kingdom, when the king blames the country's suffering on external enemies. Then in the Coronation, whose allegorical meaning is hard to decipher, social upheavals, contemporary misfortunes, the loss of royal authority, a call to resistance and restoration of order. They began to pray that there will come a Savior who will reunite the country, heal the wounds, and create marked in overthrowing Isfet or evil. J.H. Breasted, in his book, The Dawn of Conscience, 1934, he explained the situation in which he said the government is practically suspended. This is what's happening right now. The laws of the judgment hall are cast forth. Men walk upon them in the public places. The poor break open in the midst of the street. This disorganization of government is due to a state of violence and warfare within the land. A man smites his brother of the same mother. What is to be done? Behold, a man is slain by the side of his brother, while the brother forsakes him to save his own limbs. A man regards his son as his enemy. A man goes to plow, bearing his shield, so you can't be too safe. Therefore, we see the need for a savior, a man who will fix everything, because of the state's reliance on a strong leader. Again, if we go back to the beginning in the prehistoric period, okay, Henry Frankfurt spoke about the divide between the historical and mythological period of Egyptian history, and Silverman and O'Connor said that it was the strong man who was able to gather the people and create dynastic Egypt. Adolf Ehrman, in his book Life in Ancient Egypt, 1894, I don't use the modern version, he said the whole machinery of the state is set in motion by the will of the ruler alone. The taxes are paid to fill his treasury. The wars are undertaken for his renown, and great buildings are erected for his honor. Therefore, in order for the king of Egypt to conquer such blight and rule effectively, he needed the goodwill and assurance of the gods to banish such ill fortune and promote peace and wealth for the nation. In fact, he essentially entered a contract with divinity, a sort of quid pro quo relationship. That is to say, the God is saying to him, the king, you worship me and ritualize me, I will bring good fortune to you and your state. However, he still had to contend with scheming relatives and aspiring social opportunists. So there was always danger around. However, such cooperation to fulfill his mission, and his mission was to create order in the state, but primarily to worship and ritualize the gods, so that the gods build a temple to perfection, so that the gods would choose to come and reside within the sphere of the temple and bring prosperity to the nation. Such cooperation to fulfill his mission then was accomplished through his pursuing constantly engaging divine ritual with the god forces that need to be safely protected and worshipped in their homes, the temple. This and more the king came to represent. Let me reiterate that from a distance, the temple is the God's home. But within the temple itself, the God's home is the sanctuary. Okay, that's the holiest part of the whole structure. Therefore, unless the king was coronated, being through coronation, he could not enter the temple. Remember now, the temple is the loci, the focus of everything. And he's a big man. But unless he was coronated, he could not enter the temple to perform the ritual. And therefore, the society is in a state of flux. Which resulted in the society entering a state of rupture, tottering on the brink of social and spiritual chaos. As a result, after the death of the old king, with the succession determined and awaiting the coronation, then the accession or enthronement, when his power is actualized, the country was essentially at a standstill, on the precipice of spiritual and social decay. Hence the need for the coronation, though not hurried, to restore the society to normalcy. Thus, after normalcy was restored, march set in place, the orderly function of society was then resumed. Henry Frankfurt, in his Kingship of the Gods, wrote, "Since Pharaoh maintains the cosmic order, his rule is truly an image of the rule of Ra, the principal God. The analogy with Ra is stressed especially at the coronation, which can be regarded as the creation of a new epoch after a dangerous interruption between society and nature, a situation, therefore, which partakes of the quality of the creation of the universe." Second, with order restored, the king could again return to the temple, resume the daily divine ritual, and society could begin its orderly function of promoting march and enjoying the benefits of good government, which guaranteed prosperity in the land. Today, the world is in heightened expectation as King Charles of England is scheduled to be coronated. This is a good thing. But few know the true history of the rite of coronation. An article in the New York Times on March 1, 1979, front page, was entitled, "Nubian Monarchy Called Oldest. Clues to the oldest monarchy found in Nubia." It led with evidence of the oldest recognizable monarchy in human history, preceding the rise of the earliest Egyptian kings by several generations, has been discovered in artifacts from an ancient Nubia site in Africa. Even further, the discovery is expected to stimulate a new appraisal of the origins of civilization in Africa, raising the question of to what extent late Egyptian culture may have derived its advanced political structure from the Nubians. Well, what we find is evidence of, first of all, thus we look for evidence in the great festive occasion. What do we know? The actual procedure of the coronation can be reconstructed in main features from three sources: the temple reliefs of the whole of the New Kingdom, the pyramid text, and the mystery play of the succession. In Hatshepsut's temple at Deribari, the birth scenes are followed by some reference to her accession. Let me just go back a bit. What did the discovery in Nubia find? So we find evidence of an enthroned king wearing the white crown of Upper Egypt. We find the Horus falcon standing on top of a palace facade. We saw evidence of a palace structure. There was an incense burner. There were ships. There were cows. And all of this seems to indicate that what we see later in Egypt at about 3100, 3200 was seen at least 200 years in Upper Egypt. Now, if we see a king wearing a white crown, he had to be coronated. So therefore, the origin of the coronation is Nubian, is African, even before it is Egyptian. Another thing too that we must remember, that God Ra created the world and everything that was in it. The four elements, the four kingdoms, the mineral kingdom, the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, and the human kingdom, and he overlaid it with the spiritual kingdom. Well, after he had created the first four, the first thing he did was he made the black people. He made black people. Okay, Ra is an Egyptian god, right? He makes the black people before he makes quote unquote the Egyptians, right? So when right now, when I came in, I heard about Detroit. There's a group in Detroit preparing to confront Zahi Hawass, who had been the chairman of the Egyptian Antiquities Commission. All right, and he's coming to speak. But his view is that the Egyptians were not Africans. Well, he's Arabic, so, you know. But the thing is that in order to confront, he's a big one. You got to give him credit for it. But in order to confront him, you got to have the information. You know, stand in front of the building with a placard is nice. It's good showmanship. You know, but when you stand in my book, Who Are Ancient Egyptians, and so many others, and say, can you explain this? It at least gives him a moment to pause about whether you know what you're talking about. So, Hatshepsut was this female who it's been said that she represented a monstrosity because she ruled as the son of Ra. She's female, but she was daring. And her father, Thutmose I, needed a successor. He had a weak son. He had a son with a harem lady, but he wanted a more legitimate person. And this Hatshepsut was able to trace her heritage back to Ames Nefertari, the black goddess. Remember, the king is king by marriage. The queen is queen by divine right. So the guy got to marry the lady to become king, essentially, because she got the juice, and he got to get it from her. So the father said to her, he says, listen, I know you're going to succeed me and what have you, but you got to be careful. I want you to align with strong males in the country so that you will be able to reject some of the negative publicity or challenges you're going to face. So she had this architect named Sedmon, and he built all her structures, monuments, and say what you will. Like I said, you cannot put yourself in the minds of these people. But she illustrated in her temple at Deribari how she came about. So Amun, the great god, visited her mother, and she illustrated this. And this is one of the sources for the coronation. Right? So we have the pyramid text, what she left, and the mystery play of the succession. So she illustrated that the great god came and visited her mother, who was reposing the king's wife, but the god represented himself as her husband. And he visited her in a flash of perfume and light. And she was shown with a smile, as if to say she welcomed him. She shows the pregnant mother in the temple. She shows the midwives who delivered the baby. And once the baby was delivered, we see God Khnum making man on his potter's wheel. Now she's a female, he's making man on his potter's wheel. So he made two images of the queen. One is a physical image, and one was her car, which is her spirit. And then now they presented the two children to Amun sitting on the throne, and he looked over and he said, yeah, that's my, she's my son. So that's how she was able to indicate that she was in fact the son of the God, principal God, and had her name represented in the cartouche as son of Ra. When I say son of Ra and Amun, by the time of the New Kingdom, there was a fusion, a syncretism of Amun with Ra to create an even greater God. So Amun, Ra, Amun, and Amun seized upon the power of Ra and became Amun Ra. So this is the entity of the New Kingdom. So much so, the coronation ceremony was actualized the dignity of the king of Egypt, not simply as a one-phase process, but had, as indicated, deep roots in the prehistoric period, and so much more complex, actually involving a phenomenon that was divinely ordained. So, contrary to the falsity of a Caucasian Egypt, people in control by people who migrated from Southwest Asia, the Africans of Egypt considered them as autochthons, that is to say, they were native to the land which God had created for them. In such inspiration and enlightenment, their very desire, aspirations, and needs were met because of this African God who made them. To wit, Egyptians had no memory of these people from the East, though they have an affinity, a memory of and heritage with people from the South. Alfred Churchward, in his book, Science and Symbol of Primordial Man, among others, he offers that for 300,000 years of religious experience, which I call having sweet communion with deity, these Africans' memory go back that far. In addition, the New York Times of 2012 indicated the discovery of a paint factory in South Africa that was carbon dated to 107,000 years. And what do we find? We find a paint pot with red paint and a brush. And the scholars have filled in the bottom. So try to envision an artist standing there with his paint pot and his brush, and he's stirring his paint to create a palette to put his art on the wall. The indication is that he's thinking. So the article states that, it's okay, the article states that complex thinking was pushed far back, because we have to understand, as thought processes have developed, Europeans get credit for the first serious thinking dating to about 40,000. Whereas we see, as this one example, that in fact, at least 107,000 years old, one individual is thinking of putting his work on the wall. Of course, he's not the only one. Back in 2010, when I went to see Charles Finch III in Washington, D.C., we spoke about the precession. The precession was a time period of about 26,000 years. And it's been indicated that in order to measure one precession, you have to measure it against the second. So one precession, two precession. Well, Charles Finch said that there were in fact 3 precessions that we could measure, and therefore it takes us back to 4 precessions. So what we're seeing is that African stargazing, astronomy, dates to 26, 52, 78, 104,000 years. So 104,000 years over here, 107,000 years over there, 300,000 years over there. It is saying that the Africans were not sitting by waiting for the missionaries and the European adventurers to come and discover them. So we come to the question of the title of the ancestors. We know that ancestors was prevalent in early Africa. The Ethiopian king of the 25th dynasty, when asked, why did you invade Egypt? He said, because of the ancestors. The ancestors instructed me that I had to go beyond my northern border and restore order in my sister kingdom. The Memphite theology. What's the Memphite theology? Memphite theology was the discovery of a stone that is now in the British Museum. It was transcribed from a papyrus during the time of the 25th dynasty by the king at that time was Shabaka. Shabaka, so we have Bianchi, Kasha Bianchi, Shabaka, Shabataka, Taharka, Tanyutiman. Those were the Ethiopian kings who ruled Egypt. So Shabaka found this moth-eaten papyrus and had it illustrated on a black basalt stone, and it's now in the British Museum. And what it indicated is how the god Ptah created everything through thought and heart. All right? So he would think something and then speak it. So thought, the god of writing, architecture, knowledge, Ptah would think it, Thoth would interpret it, and Horus would help to bring it about. It showed that the world was created by this deity, and he indicated where everything is supposed to be. But you have to understand that it's a society of free-thinking people. That is to say, it isn't just one guy doing all the creation. Who were the creative gods of Egypt? So we have Ra, we have Ptah, Ra at Heliopolis. Dr. Diop takes great pride in indicating that the Frenchman Emile Amelino recorded and left evidence that the Anu, the people of Central Africa, sailed down the Nile and founded the city of Anu, which the Greeks call Heliopolis. So Ra, who was the African god who created everything, as I told you earlier. So Ra was located at Heliopolis, Ptah at Memphis, Thoth at Hermopolis, Khnum at Elephantine, that's at Aswan in the south, and Amun in Thebes or Karnak, where his principal temple was located. So there were 5 different created gods. What Dr. Carruthers reminded us, these were not 5 competing divine forces, but it was one force seen from different perspectives or different lenses, but it was a unity of creative principles and thought. So the Memphite theology talks about how Ptah created the world. We know there was a role for the ancestors, physical and spiritual, in which during the coronation, the shrine of the ancestors was where the king received the crowns. We've come to that. Say what you will, these Africans believe and maintain their system of kingship was ordained, created, inspired by divine forces. Theirs was a theocratic, God-ordained society regulated by a political order which Dr. Carruthers characterized as the only perfect government on earth. The ruler, the king, was the son of God. successor to the gods who rule Egypt. Himself was God on earth, whose principal function was to restore or build and protect the temples while protecting and ritualizing the gods. Given his official title as king of Upper and Lower Egypt, the king therefore had to protect and defend Egypt from internal and external enemies. And these could be spiritual, physical, or evil friendly. He had to maintain the moral and spiritual balance of the society, of the cosmos, of the universe, himself being a unique example of the creative force of what man is supposed to be, which is a microcosm of the universe. Incidentally and unfortunately, he, the king, was only a representative as the Son of God. He was not the big man himself. The big man was up there. The latter individual and his assistants were skyward in the heavenly realm. Interesting, while such big men as Amun, Ra, Osiris, and Horus were styled great gods, the king was simply a good god. Now when he died and he went to heaven to be judged, if he had lived by the tenets of Ma'at, he had a good society, he didn't do any evil or what have you, and he was judged as true of voice, then he became a great god. And he could exist in that place of divine peace, order, and tranquility up there. Given such a mandate and ascension to heaven, the king was answerable to these great gods who judged whether he had lived by the tenets of man, that is, truth, justice, righteousness, proper morals, particularly held to high standards of good government and practices. Once he was able to prove his worthiness at the bar of divine judgment, justice, he was declared true of voice, then he acquired the full great God status. Melana Karinga often referred to, how do you stand in front of your God at the end of everything? The bishop in Paris, when Louis XIV, the great Sun King, died, and he lay in the cathedral, and everybody was there to pay honor to him. And the bishop, when he looked over, he said, "You are what you are. Whatever you have done, good or bad or whatever, that is what is presented at the final judgment, and you have to be determined whether you have lived a good life or not." In reciprocity, the king had to conduct affairs of the government and state. He had to conduct wars, but in theory, his duty towards the gods was still paramount. Ormond acknowledged he was the son of Ra, who is enthroned in his heart, whom he loves above all, created by the gods of Heliopolis. His divine father created him to exalt his glory. Amun himself crowned him on his throne in the Heliopolis of the south, that is Thebes, Karnak temple. He chose him as the shepherd of Egypt, the shepherd of his people, the shepherd of the cattle of the God, and the defender of mankind. When God blessed the country, it was for the sake of their son. He was blessing humanity because of his son. When after many failures they allowed some undertaking to succeed, it was in answer to the prayers of their son. With these ideas, what is more natural than that the people should consider the king to be the mediator for his country. He alone, with the high priest, might enter the Holy of Holies in the temple. He alone might open the doors of the inner sanctuary. He alone could open the gates of the heaven, the doors of heaven. And he alone could see his Father, the God. Inherent in the principal requirements of the unfolding phenomenon of his office, it was the responsibility of the king to worship and ritualize the great God on a daily basis. This was the ritual of the daily divine worship, wherein God received a heavy breakfast in the morning, a medium-sized lunch, and a light snack before retiring for the night. As such, the ritual occurred 3 times per day. However, the king could not participate in this holy and daily rite until he received his coronation. As such, the society was in chaos. Nevertheless, irrespective of where the coronation ceremony was performed, he had to return to Heliopolis. Heliopolis in the north was where the king was actually transformed from a mere mortal to a divinity. So he could be crowned in Thebes or in Memphis or in any area of the country, but he had to return to Heliopolis, where magically, mystically, he was transformed from a mere mortal into a divine person. So, there's so much I prepared, but let me get to some more about the coronation specifically. Right? So, what happens at the coronation? I can get back to some of this. There were several events that occurred prior to the coronation. The first of these was the purification of the king. So 2 basins of gold and silver were used to baptize and purify the king. In the heavens, Horus and Thoth baptized the king. Horus and Thoth baptized the king. On earth, Horus and Set crowned the king. Horus good, Set bad, but by the two of them combining to crown the king, this was a symbol of unity between these competing forces. There is the proclamation of the protocol. The protocol was, among other things, how did the king wish to be addressed within once he had been ascended onto the throne. Then he had to receive the crowns. Schwaller tells us about 4 essential scenes in the presentation of the crown. The bestowal of the 2 crowns by Second of Angus and Horus of the Heathen, that is up and lower, represented the red and white crowns. Again, we should note that is not red and white, it's white and red. Like everything else, we have to give the Europeans credit for doing the excavation and reclaiming Egypt, without question. There was a price to pay. They ended up having all of these artifacts throughout the world. Of course, there are no other African nations that have. When you see, one of the questions I say that the young man should ask Zahi Hawass when he gets here is, how come there are 50 countries in Africa, and Egypt is in Africa, but none of them have any kind of meaningful or even display of Egyptian artifacts? They're inundated. There must have been at least 40 in England, in Europe, throughout Europe, Germany, United States, wherever. They don't have any in Africa. The Africans don't have it. That is why when we speak about, okay, so I was in Detroit with Dr. J, and he said that we need to thank Dr. Diop. And I said, one Friday we were sitting there, and he said, we need to thank Dr. Diop. And I said, what for? He said, Diop gave us Egypt. Well, Diop gave us Egypt, but what are we doing to hold Egypt? So much so that Zahi Hawass can come here and tell us that Egypt is not, the Egyptians were not Africans. Well, among some of the other things that I've done, I wrote this 12-volume set to teach our young people how to get engaged in ancient Egypt. It's a reading strategy. If you, like any parent, whether you are in Georgia or whether you are in a cave in Afghanistan, what's your principal ask? That my son or my daughter learn how to read. And what I've done is using Black history material to teach young people how to read effectively. Okay? And I'm doing it through the lens of ancient Egypt. So this is a 12-volume set. You need to get this. Now, I don't know what it's cost to produce it, about $25 per volume. So that's $300 for the 12 volume encyclopedic set, right? Now I was in, I mentioned this before, I was in a printing place in Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn, and this young man came in and he wanted to mail a package. And I said, the lady said, well, you have to take it out of this box and put it in this box. And he took out what was in this box and put it on the counter, and lo and behold, it was a beautiful pair of sneakers. And sitting there, I said to him, wow, how much do they cost? He said, $600. I bought it on eBay for $600, and I'm trying to sell it. I bought it on Amazon for $600. I'm trying to sell it on eBay for $400. And you see, in fact, I would sell all of my sneakers. Now, Malcolm used to say, that nigga lost. Right? If you would spend $600 on a sneaker, buy 12 volumes for $300 and give it to your grandchild. Because your grandson will say, I'm writing not for you, I'm writing for your grandchildren. And he could say, one day he said, Grandfather, what were you doing when that Monderson was at Professor Mackey's lecture? And he was telling you about these books. Did you get it? No, I got me a pair of sneakers for $600. Back in '96, I wrote this piece here supporting UAM with ultraviolence. I was the chairman of the Bones Committee, where Samuel Carson was returned to Ghana, West Africa, creating a site of pilgrimage for African people seeking their roots in Africa. This August 1st, 2023, will be 25 years since this event occurred. I have to stop what I've been doing. And I'll say this without qualms. If it hadn't been for me, the name Sonny Carson would have been forgotten from history. But I kept his name alive, just like I kept Dr. Ben's name alive. And I kept Marcus Garvey. I kept all the great ones. Sonny Carson, who was a born visionary. Remember Marcus Garvey and the UNIA? This was 96. Marcus Garvey and the UNIA, 2006. So I've been doing my homework. So after the king received the 2 crowns, he has to run around the wall of the temple in which the coronation takes place, meaning that he had to show that he was in control of the entire land. And then he had to release 4 birds to take the message to the 4 corners of the world, south, north, not north, south. Again, we have been misdirected or miseducated about the things that are important to our people's cultural history. It's north-south, not north-south, it's south-north. It is not red and white, it's white and red. It is not first cataract, second cataract, third cataract, fourth cataract, sixth cataract. Remember, when the Nile God departed from Central Africa, which is the source of the Nile, as he was driving down or sailing down the Nile River, he did not say, I will name you the 6th cataract. I will name you the 5th cataract, till you got to Aswan and call it the 1st cataract. No, those names, those appellations were instilled by European ascent of the river as opposed to the African descent of the river. That's why when Edward Navy, great Egyptologists. He cleared Hatshepsut's temple, and then he cleared Mentuhotep's temple. Hatshepsut from 93 to 97, and Mentuhotep from 1893 to 1897, and Mentuhotep from 1903 to 1907. He was referring to a particular individual on the Nile, and he said that as the man ascended the Nile, the west was on his right. And Dr. Diop said, no, his west should have been on his left, because what he did do was turn to face the place of his origin. Just as how the Muslims and the Jews turn to the west, where their site of earliest reverence is located, and the Christians place their altar to the east, he simply turned to the region where he came from. So the 4 bars go to south, north, east, and west.
You said south, north, east, and west.
South, north, east, and west. South, of course, not north. Okay, we're conditioned to say north, south, east, and west. Okay, but it's the opposite.
Yes, sir.
We're seeing the world through European lens.
But it's like the Nile River was from south to north.
The Nile River went from south to north. So that's the orientation of those early Africans. The Tigris-Euphrates River, Southwest Asia, where the Europeans actually began, runs from north to south. So they superimposed that orientation on the African conception of his understanding of the world. Okay? So we have to unlearn.
The wrong.
But how we do that? We gotta listen to our researchers who are in the field, like myself. You gotta buy my books. You gotta help me. Run to the bookstore. Don't walk. You gotta be armed with information, with knowledge. It's good to sit there and listen to the lectures and what have you. But you gotta be proactive rather than reactive.
So is it east west or is it west east? Is it west east or east west?
Well, if you're looking south,
north.
the east is to the right, west is to your left. He was saying that the man was looking south, and so therefore his right was on the west was on his right, which is ascent of the river as opposed to descent. So the coronation of the king of Egypt. Worship of the ancestors as all as the system of kingship in Egypt. The gods and successor spirits were considered ancestors. The ancestral spirits formed the force that supported the king. Statues and standards of the ancestor kings and priests were carried in procession of the different festivals. As indicated on the plan of the Temple of Luxor, which is one of the great structures, and it's essentially intact with a few niches here and there. Lonnie Bell, who's an American Egyptologist, speaks of the chamber of the divine king. He said the chamber of the divine king, the room in which the divinity of the king was most prominently portrayed, was a real power point in Luxor Temple. There, after the king's purification by water and ritual introduction to Amun-Ra, the coronation rites were repeated. The god, or rather the priest playing the role of the god, placed the various forms of crowns one by one on the king's head. That is to say, they put the white crown on his head, and then they put the red crown on his head, and then they put the double crown on his head, verifying that they fit and that the pharaoh was ready to assume the duties of kingship on earth. During each separate crowning, the king knelt before Amun-Ra. One of the most fascinating things that you could ever envision is this great king, this god, kneeling to praise his God. So during each separate crown, the king knelt before Amun-Ra with his back towards the god, and the god would put his hands on him. This, you call that the laying on of the hands ceremony. And here he crowned him. Through this laying on of hands, the royal the spirit of the god was transformed magnificently from father to the son. The rite rejuvenated the king, as the silence signified by small suckling scenes nearby. Once more divine kingship was being reborn. So that placing the hand on the king was a rebirth of creation, a rebirth of the emergence of the universe, a rebirth of the society with a new leader. There were two ancestral shrines, one for the north and one for the south. The ancestral shrines were where the spirit of the deceased ancestors were located. And there the king was able, today the Pope has, there's supposedly a mystical chest where all the good works of the saints are housed. And the Pope is able to draw political capital or spiritual capital from this chest to do what he's supposed to do. So in the same way, and you can see that there is a great similarity between the ancient African beliefs and practices and what modern man has reshaped or remodeled for his experience. So the king could draw from the spirit of the ancestors who, even though they were departed, still had an interest in the society, and they would help him to rule effectively, sort of. So the two ancestral shrines in the south and north contain spiritual power that surrounded and supported the king. This is where the two crowns are placed on the king's head. First the white crown and then the red crown. The crowns were charged with power and transformed the king from a mere mortal into a god. His thinking was no longer as a man but as a divinity. The ancestral shrines were permanently located at Heliopolis, or what we call, or what we call Heliopolis. But these were we have these 10 by 10 tents that are easily collapsible and transported elsewhere and set up away. So the ancestral shrines, their spiritual forces notwithstanding, these were flimsy structures that can be assembled or disassembled and move from place to place. But wherever the coronation takes place, whether it's in the south or in the central or in the north, then it can be recollapsed and taken back to Heliopolis, where the spiritual power is transforms the king into a divinity. The crowns were charged with power and transformed the king from mere mortal into God. His thinking was no longer as a man but as a divinity. The ancestral shrines were permanently located at Heliopolis, though they would be lent elsewhere for coronation. They were made of flimsy material, could be dismantled and redecorated, where the said festival of rejuvenation was held. This also applied to coronation, whether it was at Memphis or at Thebes. However, only Heliopolis could confirm the spiritual potency that transformed the king into deity. Pianki of the 25th Ethiopian dynasty left evidence of his journey to Heliopolis to be crowned. So when we think about what the Ethiopians did in their time in Egypt for 100 years, they have left enormously important evidence of their being there. Right? We have the Shabaka stone, which is called the Memphite theology. We have evidence of the king's journey to Heliopolis, where he was crowned. He drank from the cool pool where the sun god Ra also drank. He washed his face. That's where Ra drank his water during his journey across the heavens. Taharka, one of the great ones, at 21 years old, he was put in charge of the Egyptian and the Ethiopian forces, and he fought against the Assyria. 21 years old. He was commander of 2 armies. He was a tremendous builder. He built significantly at Karnak Temple. Karnak Temple, where God Amun resided. He built 4 kiosks at the 4 corners of the temple. North, south, east, and west. He built in the temple of Mut. He built the kiosks in the temple of Mut. Right? His kiosk in the great court at the entrance of Karnak Temple, beyond the first pylon. Flinders Petrie said that this structure was set with doors to the north, south, east, and west, with the north, with Egypt represented the north, which indicated how far south the center of thought was. So, if Egypt was only the north of Pianke's kingdom, or the Ethiopian kingdom, where was the south? The south may have been as far as South Africa. So again, these Africans were not waiting to be discovered by the Greeks and the Romans and everybody else who came after. This is what our young need to know. So when you ask a youngster, who's the world's first mathematician? Einstein! No. It was Imhotep. Alright? He was the world's first architect of record, the first man of medicine of record, the first mathematician of record, the first poet of record. We need to know that. So the king cannot officiate in the temple until he's crowned. When crowned, he becomes the son of God, and can relate as a father to his son. Now, in order for the coronation to take place, the old king has to die. The succession involves certain responsibilities he must perform as the king awaits burial. So the time when the old king dies to the time when the old king is buried is called the period of the succession. All right? A number of things are happening. He gotta wait this 70-day period. He has to wait. He has to wait until the king is buried. Then the king goes to heaven, and the king is judged in heaven. And then heaven sends a messenger saying, he made it. Only then could he be coronated. But in the meantime, the country is in a state of flux. Everything is haywire. The most important glue that holds the society together is the ritual of the daily divine ritual, which is performed in the temple. And he can't go into the temple if he's not coronated. And therefore, the society is in chaos. And people are praying. They're singing praises to the old king, and they're praying for a new king, and we're waiting for 70 days before the old king is buried. Now, so the succession involves certain responsibilities he must perform as the king awaits burial. The enthronement comes after the burial and coronation, but this is where he is empowered to exercise full power as king. So we talk about the coronation, but we also spoke about the enthronement, the succession. Right? Why the succession is important? First of all, the mummification of the king lasts for a period of 70 days before he is mummified, fully then buried. The burial, as the nation mourns, a procession led to the tomb site where mourning relatives accompany individuals carrying tomb furniture, along with much singing and praying. At the tomb entrance, the seven priests. They said Moses was a seventh priest. That's the guy that wears the outfit. Come to me. Some priests perform the opening of Mount ceremony. The function of the opening, if you were at Dr. Ben's funeral, you see that Professor Smalls did the opening of the Mount ceremony on Dr. Ben. The purpose of the opening of the Mount ceremony is so that the deceased, once he has reached his final destination to be judged, he can now speak. He can reconstitute his body, bring back the 9 parts of his soul, the 9 parts of the soul, bring him back into being a full human being. And you not believing it. And then he can defend himself to say that I have lived according to the admonition of bringing truth and justice into the world, goodness. So the opening of the mouth ceremony at the tomb enables the deceased individual to reconstitute his body, reclaim the disparate part of his soul, and speak and move about in heaven so as to exist among the gods. Word from beyond by a divine messenger at the conclusion of the judgment is that he made it. Now, let's get on with the coronation. So there were 5 acts preceding the coronation. The first one is the purification. He has to be purified. The proclamation of the protocols. That is to say, we know that the king had 5 names. His Horus name, his golden Horus name, his 2 ladies name, his king of Upper and Lower Egypt name, and his son of Ra name. Right? We mentioned that last week. Each king had a protocol that how he wanted to be addressed, whether by native Egyptians or foreign dignitaries who would come to visit. So we talk about Tutmosis III. His protocols were Horus, mighty bull, shining in Thebes. His favorite of the 2 goddesses, enduring in kingship like Ra in heaven. His golden Horus, mighty in strength, splendid in diadems. His Sutenbar, his king of Upper and Lower Egypt, lord of the 2 lands, Menkaper Ra. And his son of Ra is Tutmosis, beautiful of form. Of course, he was not the only one with protocols, but what we do know is that the protocols were in existence in the same format as late as the time of the Greeks. We have protocols from the time we have the coronation. We have from the 3rd dynasty onwards, at least 4 of the 5 names were in place, and the king had to have the protocols established. Since Pharaoh maintains the cosmic order, his rule is truly an image of the rule of Ra. Ra rules by true virtue, goodness, truth, righteousness. The analogy with Ra is stressed especially at the coronation, which can be regarded as a creation of a new epoch after a dangerous interruption between society and nature. A situation which therefore partakes of the quality of the creation of the universe. The actual procedure of the coronation I talk about the main features that tell us about the coronation. The temple relief of the new kingdom, that is Hatshepsut, and how she was impregnated, and her mother presentation to Amun. Right? The mystery play of the succession. This is something that is happening during the period of waiting before the coronation. So the king had to visit the important sites in the country where he's going to be in charge of the entire area. All right? And at each one of these sites, he's traveling by boat. Of course, this is the principal highway tonight. All right? And then the play of the succession will take place in this particular city, in that city, and so forth. So, the Hatshepsut's illustration is old kingdom, is new kingdom. The mystery play of the succession is Middle Kingdom, and the pyramid text is Old Kingdom. He states that the actual procedure of the coronation can be reconstructed in its main features from three sources: the temple release of the New Kingdom, the pyramid text, and the mystery play of the succession. In Hatshepsut's temple at Deobari, the birth scenes are followed by some which refer to her accession. However, these show us not the ritual procedure, but rather the ideal significance of the event, serving as they do fellows to proclaim the legitimacy and the divine sanction of that theological monstrosity, a woman on the throne of Horus. She was the son of Ra. So, if we go back to, after this, let's use Hatshepsut because it's the most practical example of what takes place. The pyramid text is theoretical. The mystery play of the succession was contained in an enormous papyrus roll that is written down, but she has illustrated what happens, right? So after this, the crowns are brought on their names are made known to Hatshepsut. Next, the queen is depicted crowned and in royal attire before Amun. Here, in the world of the gods, a scene is enacted which finds its precise equivalent upon earth during the said festival, when the crown prince pays homage to the king. The prince is received by a priest, Imhotep, who stands before the throne, as the same priest does in the Old Kingdom, acting for the king throughout the Jubilee. In relief, Hatshepsut stands before the throne of Amun, received by an Imhotep priest who says, "Thou art joyful, living with thy car eternally like Ra." Therefore, Thutmose I has Hatshepsut placed before him upon his throne, and putting his hands on her shoulders, he presents her to the nobles of the king, the notables, the friends, the courtiers of the residents, and the chiefs of the people. And he said, "This is my daughter Hatshepsut. She will be king to follow me. You are supposed to obey her every command. And those of you who do will be spared, and those of you who do not will be punished." The full title of the queen, next, the date, and finally the two ceremonies which mark the coronation of each king after Menes. So Menes is the founder of the dynasty, so we find that the coronation is occurring from the beginning of dynastic Egypt as late as we have evidence of it as late as the time of the Greeks. So it is a continuous process. What it is not an individual being crowned. It is a concept, a system, a principle, a spirit being transferred from one king to the other, to the other, to the other, so that the divine spark that was imparted from the beginning runs through each one. It runs through principally the female member of the family. As I said, the king is king by virtue of marriage. The queen is queen by virtue of divine transmission. We see, among other things, right? We see the queen brought to the dual shrines, the shrines of the ancestors of north and south. First to the upper one, then to the lower Egyptian one, by the Imhotep priests of the crowns are set upon her head by Horus and Set. Again, not Horus and Thoth, but Horus and Set. So what we do have is evidence that of what transpired in a northern ancestral shrine. A poem was read regarding the red crown. It says, and we take it for granted, okay, remember now, Mentuhotep, who founded the 11th dynasty in the Middle Kingdom, we find in his temple a Hebset festival example of him enthroned wearing the red crown of Lower Egypt that survived. So it's a given because of the dual nature of the kingship that there was another statue seated wearing the white crown, but we don't have a statue. We have the statue of him wearing the red crown. So in the northern shrine of the red crown, and we take it for granted that there is a similar poem being read in the southern white crown ancestral shrine. And it goes like this. O red crown, O Inu, O great one, O magician, O fiery snake, let there be terror of me like the terror of thee. Let there be fear of me like the fear of thee. Let there be awe of me like the awe of thee. Let me rule, a leader of the living. Let me be powerful, a leader of spirits. Let my blade be formed against my enemies. O Enu, thou hast come forth from me, and I have come forth from thee. The great one has borne thee. The exalted one has adorned thee. For thou art Horus, who has fought for the protection of thine eye. Stand as king over it, over this land which has come forth from Atum, the spittle which has come forth from the beetle. He, the king over it, he high over it, that thy father may see thee. He comes to thee, O father of his. He comes to thee, O Ra. Repeat this. You repeat that 7 times. Let him grasp the heavens and receive the horizon. Let him dominate the 9 bows and equip the offerings, the Enad. The Enad is a set of gods. It varied depending on where you were. If you were in Hermopolis, there were 9 gods of the Enad. If you were in Karnak, there were 15 gods of that Enad. Give the crook into his hand, so that the head of the lower and upper Egypt shall be bowed. A similar ceremony took place, as I said, in the upper Egyptian white crown shrine of the ancestors. So he now receives the crown. The king receives the crown from the gods. 2 priests dressed as Horus and Set placed the crowns on his head. First the white crown, then the red crown. He now becomes king of Upper and Lower Egypt. This is where the spiritual, mystical, and metaphysical transformation takes place. It is where he becomes a god in spiritual power, omniscience, and mathematical capabilities. Given everything is seen from a mathematical perspective. When Thoth assisted Ptah to construct the heavens, he used mathematics to create the 4 pillars of heaven. Dr. Obenga, remember him? Diab assistant. He believes mathematics is the language of civilization. Mathematics is the language of civilization. He has to circuit the wall to show that he rules over the entire land. He releases the birds. So in essence then, what we have here is a process of spiritual, metaphysical transference of divine power, inspiration, guidance, and fortitude from one king to the next. At the death of one king, there's a hiatus where the nation is troubled because the foreign leader is not at the helm. He's then coronated and reestablishes, heals the wounds, and projects the nation forward. So, for the most part, I wanted to say a couple of other things, but I would ask Brother Ray if there are any questions. Then I could come back to some of my closing remarks.
Okay, now we're going to take a break.
Well, it's okay. Yeah, whatever you do. It's.
If you wanna
If you have questions, I will take questions.
Okay, Zoom audience, anybody got a question for Dr. Monderson? Anybody from the Zoom audience want to ask a question for Dr. Monderson? Zoom audience, anybody unmute yourself and ask Dr. Monderson a question? All right, anybody from the floor? Goodness.
Greetings.
How you doing?
Yes.
I wanted to ask if you've come across any evidence of the kings having polygamous relationships or marriages.
How what?
If you have come across any evidence of the
Polygamy.
kings having any polygamous marriages or relationships, and how did that work?
Well, for the most part, the priesthood controls the whole notion of succession. And because succession is so important, it is encouraged that the king have as many companions as possible. However, there is only one great wife. He could have as many concubines as is necessary, according to his wants. There have been a number of statements made regarding political marriages that many neighboring states sent young princesses to be a part of the king's household, to marry the king. But he never really married them. They were a part of his harem. If you remember, it was said that Solomon had 600 wives, but when Queen of Sheba visited, she was the apple of his eye. Dr. Van Sertima said, and it wasn't, he had women, but he was more interested in the political alliance with Sheba, because Sheba had an enormous kingdom, and he only had that little piece that we call Israel today, right? There was some years ago, there was a newspaper called News of the World, on which it would be found at the supermarket. It was a tabloid at the supermarket checkout counter. And they always had some kind of crazy story. There was one I remember where the British archaeologists found the home of the Queen of Sheba in Nigeria. Wonderful article. However, they showed the Queen of Sheba as a white female. Okay? Now, Dr. Ben always got a lot of mileage over a text in the Bible in which he said that the Queen of Sheba said, "I am black and comely." Right? Okay, the detractors say she didn't say I'm black and comely. She said I am black but comely, which is one is saying I am proud of my blackness. One is saying, I'm not so proud of being black. Okay, black. But this article showed that the Queen of Sheba, her home was found in Nigeria, which meant that her kingdom expanded from the west across the belt of Africa all the way to the east coast. So Solomon, he was after a political alliance that enabled him to reach from his kingdom into Africa. In Egypt, many of their neighbors sent princesses to marry the king. only one of them was really successful. That is Nefertiti, Nefertiti. She came to marry Amenhotep III the Magnificent. His wife was Queen T. So when she got there, he was an old man. So Queen T, she didn't have any problems with her husband having all these women. But she said, my husband is too old to marry you. Why don't you marry my son, Amenhotep IV? He was the religious revolutionary, and they call his revolution a heresy. But that's wrong, because the notion of heresy, where's the beef? You cannot say where's the beef in a document that's 1900, because the term where's the beef was invented then. All right? So they said that his revolution was a heresy. It was a revolution, a religious revolution. Nevertheless, this man received the most vile condemnation because he challenged religious orthodoxy and he introduced a form of monotheism. Okay? Nefertiti was a white princess. Nefertari was the black queen and goddess. We get confused with the two. Even when my niece was buried, the priest said, oh, Nefertiti. I said, sir, I hate to correct you in this holy place, but I gave my niece the name Nefertari, not Nefertiti. She's off the scene with her husband praising the atom. Okay. So some of the criticism that was leveled against her is just saying, this guy here, they have 6 daughters. And some of these detractors, I don't even think he was the father of the children. What they didn't realize is that they were attacking the integrity of the children's mother, who stood there with her husband to worship the atom. Okay? It's one thing to say, well, is she a hypocrite? So when they realized what they were doing, they backtracked. But the fact of the matter is that the king had a principal wife and a number of secondary harem ladies. And this created a problem because there was always bickering and fighting, because this queen wants to know, this harem lady wants to know why your son and not her son is the successor to the king. So there was always conspiracy. So as early as the Middle Kingdom, the king established a co-regency to say, this is my son, he's the one who's going to succeed me. Because if there was no co-regent, then, and the king died, no one knows who's going to succeed him. Right? So, what happens? There was one instance where after a challenging day, the king relaxing in the castle, and he in the palace, and he heard a commotion of people running towards him. And he jumped out of his head, they were trying to assassinate him. And he got his sword, and he fought all these offenders. And he declared immediately that this son is the one who will succeed me. Right? There was another instance in the same period, and there's a story about it, where the king was assassinated. Right? And his son was on the field of battle, engaging engaging an enemy. Okay, word comes to the prince that your father was assassinated, and he left the field of battle to join him back to the palace to seize power, because with no head, the society is in turmoil. The revolutionaries can claim power. In the start of the 17th dynasty, just on the precipice of the new kingdom. When Seqenenretau, Kamos, and Amos were in the north fighting the Hyksos, a prince named Teti the Handsome, he fomented a revolution to oust the reigning king in Thebes. And his mother, Teti Sheri, and his sister, Ahotep, they gathered the loyalists and fought off the coup attempt by Teti the Handsome. Right? So the point is that there was always intrigue about who will succeed the king. So there were ladies who often fomented problems, but they were not the great wife who sat beside the king. And Amenhotep III was one of the first kings that we have clearly defined evidence that his wife was equal to him. In fact, when foreign leaders came, they went to see her to influence him. Remember, we started by talking about Jill Biden. I tell him what I hear the people say. And that's what Obama's wife, Michelle Obama. Remember that cover article in the New Yorker where they were showing when Obama. Okay, so right now the president went to Ireland, and now we're hearing things about Scotland and whatever. Everybody, men wearing skirts and what have you. When Obama went to Kenya, they crucified him. Asante called it the lynching of Obama. That's why my book was so important, because I came for a black man that was being victimized, and I came to his rescue by writing and identifying the people who were unkind to Obama. You want to know who they were? It's in there. It meant Joe Wilson and all of them, Mitchell, and you name it. Okay? So the point is that African history is replete with all kinds of situations. Okay? We were told there have been periods of luster and lusterless. What we have to do is to find those periods in African history that is full of luster, adore it, and eliminate the periods that are lusterless.
Zoom audience, any questions for Dr. Monderson? Anybody in the Zoom audience would like to ask Dr. Monderson a question?
Well,
Anybody from the floor wants to ask Dr. Monderson a question?
I have a quick one, Dr. Monderson.
yeah.
I'm not as, thank you for being on point. Am I right in thinking that there were actually 25 full dynasties, or were there more? And if there were more, please educate me. And how many years did all these dynasties cover? It seems like if you really go back in history, keep up with the dynasty of Egypt, you're going to be reading for a long time.
Well, you can get a history of Egypt. One of my books, which I showed you, was called Where Are the Carmine Kings? That's a history of Egypt. Simply a history of where the kings left their names. The 25th dynasty was the Ethiopian dynasty. There was a Greek priest named Manetho, who wrote a history of Egypt that went back to the time when the gods ruled Egypt. He was he was of the 29th dynasty. Okay? That dynasty was not finished in his time, but he is the first person that created the whole construct of the dynasties. So modern scholars have retained that as a manageable period, a manageable mechanism of counting the years of the different rules. A dynasty is simply ruled by a single family. Okay? Now, we go to the first dynasty, which is generally thought to be around 3200 BC, all right, which begin with means or normal. Flinders Peak, there's something called a zero dynasty, or dynasty 0. Just you have dynasty 1, dynasty 2. Flinders Petrie said that he found 6 kings buried at Abydos. Abydos is an important center of the worship of Osiris. He found 6 kings buried there that were pre-Norman, before Norman. Amillennium said he found 16 kings buried there. Right? Now that 16 kings may take us back to the early period of the discovery at Custal in Nubia, where the first, the origin of monarchy and the coronation began. Now we talk a lot about normal or means as founding the first dynasty. What we do know is that this guy emerged at 3200 BC with an armada. He sailed from the south to the north, conquered the north, unified the country, unified the white crown and the red crown, and created a white resting on red double crown. 3200. But we don't know where he got it. We don't know where he got his information from, where he got his training, his administrative skills, how he was coronated. Okay, so all that's a gray area, and much of that is based on speculation or reconstruction that modern scholars attempt to put in a manageable form so that we can arrive at the first dynasty at 3200. Okay, so there may have been, just as how there is dynasty 0, there could have been dynasty 0 minus 1, minus 2, minus 3. So we do know that the 1,000-year period from 4240 to 3200, called the pre-dynastic Badarian Emirates and Gorzian cultures, there were leaders, but they weren't kings in the sense that of the structure that we see in Egypt from Narma, if you will, up to Pianki. Okay, but the kings, it stands to reason that there were kings before Narma. Like I said, Amillennium found 16, and these may go back to the Nubian discovery indicated in the New York Times of March 1, 1979. You should make a note of March 1, 1979, New York Times finds the earliest monarchy evidence in Nubia at a place called Tasseti, the kingdom of Tasseti, and their burial was a place called Custal. Now, if we look at the Black Genesis by Bovard and Brophy, they're saying that a place called Naphtali, okay, Naphtali in the desert, where the first astronomers, the mapping of the heavens took place, right? The construction of large structures, the worship of the cow goddess. Cow goddess worship, we do know that Hathor was a cow goddess. Now, it's interesting because, Brother Brown, if you're listening, when we go to Luxor in the Great Court, I often sit there and I watch people come and go, come and go, come and go. But there is an illustration of the procession called Ascent of the Princes, where the sons of Ramses II are visiting the temple of Luxor, and it's illustrated. And in the procession, the third, I think, or second cow, the head, a Nubian lady is coming out of one of the lead cow's heads. Hathor is on the Narma palette at 3200 BC. Okay? We see her at Luxor in the 19th dynasty, the 20th dynasty, in the Festival of Men. I didn't get a chance to get to that. Festival of Men. Two things baffle modern scholars today. One, the Festival of Men is where Ramses III at his temple at Medinet Habu, very well illustrated, where the king really gets his power. That's when they release the four boards. Remember we talked four boards. One of the priests in the procession reads the Book of the Negro. What is the Book of the Negro doing in this high festival? And second, there's a black guy standing there. What's this black guy doing at this important festival? They can't explain that. But they want to tell us that the Egyptians came from Southwest Asia and Alexander Moret said, in essence, who influenced the South other than the North? And Dr. Diab says, yeah, well, why all the important sites and the important monuments are in the South and there's nothing in the North? I mean, they didn't build pyramids where they came from. They didn't use hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphics were written on papyrus. The Southwest Asians, they wrote on clay tablets. Now, I sent my kids to school and they have a set of books on their back in a backpack. Can you imagine that as a young student going to school in Southwest Asia with clay tablets? I mean, you know. So they didn't invent that over there, okay? And so much that you find in Egypt, there was no evidence of where they came from. So we've got to be careful about how we ingest information that is handed to us. You don't run with everything you find. You think about it and make your own judgment.
Okay, one last question. Can you let the audience know how to purchase your books? That's the first question. So this way it'll be when I put it on YouTube. And number two, how large was the military to protect these great dynasties? And were there often invaders trying to slide in and conquer?
Well, let me take the second question first, right? Again, the Norma palette and the Norma mace head, those are the two earliest historical documents, right? They indicate that in the conflict between the North and South, in which Norma was victorious, he captured maybe 100,000 people, 400,000 goats, 1 million goats. I mean, they were counting in large numbers. Now, in order to secure such great booty, meant that they had to have had an enormous army. When we're talking about a military force of, let us say, 25 to 40,000, that's substantial. Okay? Substantial. We're looking at a population that was between 5 and 7 million people. So, the size of the military. And we ran into what is called a conscripted military, right? There were 42 nomes, or like we would say today in the United States, we got 50 states. These were mini states, right? And especially by the time of the New Kingdom, each state had to supply a set number of people to serve in the military. So the military force can be in the excess of 15, 20,000 depending. And we're talking about charioteers, we're talking about a navy, we're talking about a military army, if you will, of archers, bowmen, spearmen, swordsmen, and stuff like that. So there is no There's no end to how many a conscripted army could be. Second, the books are all the books are available on the all the books are available on Amazon under my name, Frederick Monderson. But also I am at Suman Publishers is my company, and I'm at pardon me, but this bicycle thing is not working out so well. But Post Office Box 160685, Brooklyn, New York. Post Office Box 160685, Brooklyn, New York 11216. Suman Publishers. If you write me with the respective price of the book, generally my books, they're $40 each. There's some that are 20, and Karnak Temple is 30. But everything is on Amazon. You can pay the price of Amazon. If you buy 2 or more books, I give you free shipping. I need your help to continue my work. I'm saying to you, ladies and gentlemen, that this book here, you need this book for your children. Okay? If there's one thing that you can get, it's a 12-volume set. If you get this for your child, it is a gift of immense value. I'm trying to inculcate the young into learning not only the history but the writing of Egypt, and it's replete with photographs. So you get text, you get chance to write in hieroglyphics, you get chance to view the images of the monuments and what have you. And there is so much more. There, I've identified something like 30 reading strategies that the young reader will learn. It is full of vocabulary, syllabication, parts of speech, types of sentences, comparison, contrast, you name it. So this is the gift. It's not yet ready for publication. I'm awaiting my Library of Congress certificate. They challenged the book about the art that was in the book. So far, they have requested clarification of 10 of the 12 volumes. I finished today responding to the Library of Congress for 10 of the 12 volumes. They're saying that there are different people who examine the book before they can give you the certificate. Okay? So I was supposed to release this book last Black History. My friend said, no, wait until this Black History. Well, I submitted it and I'm still waiting. But this I would recommend for your young people, because we don't have no young people. That no meaningful introduction for young people. I mean, in our neighborhood, what we see in the walls of the buildings in our neighborhood are people with guns. In the other people's neighborhood, they have young people with scientific equations. You walking down the street, you can see on the wall as a young student next to the school some kind of scientific equation that you can learn something. Over here, what we see? Guns for sale.
Guns and drugs and liquor.
Okay? So this is my gift to you. If you ain't running to well, not yet, because give me a couple weeks or so, but it'll be on Amazon with other books. And let me tell you something else. And I need help with this, okay? So I'm having my work translated right now as we speak into Spanish, French, and Portuguese. And I still got to work out the French and Portuguese portions of it. And then I'm trying to get it into the African languages. So we're doing things. according to Dr. Lewis, to have global impact.
Okay,
Yes,
we got
sir.
another question?
Well, I wanted to know, when is you have tributes to Dr. Ben. You have that on the schedule? With all that's been
Not,
going on?
well, you're right, all that's going on, and I'm heading to Egypt with Brother Brown.
Anthony Brown.
No.
I'm sorry.
Brother Walter Brown.
Gotcha. Oh.
Look, there are two people that know the whole. I think there's a series on CNN right now called The Whole Story. Something like that. It's supposed to be starting soon. There are two people that know the whole story. Dr. Lewis, and there's a guy named Bianchi in Detroit. I'm not affiliated with anyone. As I told you, I came from Guyana as a young man, not yet 19. I had to imagine me as a cobbler. I had to make my own shoes and then make my own bootstraps. I put on my bootstraps and pull myself up. Nobody helped me. I am an independent thinker. Okay? But I learned from the great ones. Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, Professor Simmons, G. Tuwusi, Son Carson, Elam Brock, David Dinkins, Bill Lynch, Monderson. Do what you gotta do. And this is what I'm doing. You wanna help me? Go. You know what? I ain't gonna be sitting up all night long wondering whether this person or that person is buying my books or not. You don't buy my books, you're not getting what's in there. I'm an archaeologist. I'm a researcher in archaeology, and I'm a photographer. I do everything. I write my books, I research, I write my books, I take my photographs, I edit my books, I publish my books. Because, like Stephen Biko said, I write what I want. I'm not surrendering my work to the whims of some publisher who's gonna white out this or white out that. My children are being instructed that this is what we are for. My grandmother and my mother, early Pan-African internationalists. My mother dressed in the Ghanaian flag on March 6, 1957, fighting for the independence of Africa. And I'm not doing anything other than that.
Let me see that. Let me see that.
This is something that appeared in the Daily Challenge. In my grandmother Cherise Prevel, my mother Mita Monderson. She's dressed in the Ghanaian flag. Okay, March 6, 1957. We are there, and we still out there. Okay, so I'm trying to give you as much as I can, so that you go. Fighting apartheid. Fight apartheid. I was on the front page of the Daily Challenge on June 16, June 16, right? 1996. June 16, 1996. It says, "Were you there?" And then I wrote Black Solidarity Today, History and Vision. I wrote
Daily Challenge.
Black Solidarity Today, History and Vision. Were you there? In 1996, when we were fighting for South Africa. Okay? And as I said, I wrote the Afrocentric response in 1992, an invasion of Somalia. And last year I published the Diaspora Declaration, which is calling upon Africa to reclaim her children abroad so that we can join hands. You know, when Sonny Carson, again, oh, I didn't show you this, all right? Brother, you need to get this, all right? Runaway slaves, long journey home. Okay, this is the bones of Samuel Carson leaving the institutional church on Adelphi Avenue in Brooklyn. And you will note that my name is right here. Fred Monderson, I did the photography. I was also the chairman of the Bones Committee. This August 1st, 2003, will be 25 years since we sent the bones of Samuel Carson, the runaway slave, back to Ghana to create a site of pilgrimage to African people, so that you want to go to Africa and find your roots. First thing to do is stop at Samuel Carson's grave site. He's buried next to a Jamaican enslaved female named Crystal. And we opened
In Ghana.
the door in Ghana. We opened the door of return. There's always been a door of no return. Samuel Carson, and I was a principal in the movement of the bones back to Africa. He opened the door of return. And guess what? August 1st, 1998, Jerry Rawlings was the president of Ghana. And he said that the Africans in America are Africa's Trojan horse. We are the strength of Africa in this country, and we not forget that. And with this, he launched the first Emancipation Day ceremony. I was in Guyana recently, and this guy was telling me about, oh, you know, come August we're gonna have. So I said, do you know the history of it? He said, yeah. I said, no, you don't. And I schooled him. He was surprised that I was a principal. And I don't get no credit for it. Like I didn't get no credit for that 1,000 pieces that I wrote for the Daily Challenge, and all the books that I wrote, and I ain't getting no help. My help comes from the Lord, from our Father, our God, and my ancestors. Meet Monderson and Cherise Prevail. They strengthened me to continue this work. Okay? And then, of course, the Africans that I've worked with, because I am true of voice. I'm true of voice. I am true of voice. Thank you. Yes, sister.
All right, it's after 10, but I'm gonna ask, are you going to be here to have the tribute to Dr. Ben?
I am going to be here. I'll be back before the end of this month, right? I generally have the tribute on the, I used to call it the Memorial Day tribute. And people say, even before he passed, you know. But I set it up around that time. I don't know what Brother Ray is doing around that time, but you know, if necessary, I would like to do it perhaps over here, if I would get the permission. But I've done 13 of those, okay? I've done 13 of those tributes to Dr. Ben, and it's only because of COVID and everything else that's going on right now. I haven't had the time to dedicate myself to that. But my job has always been to keep Dr. Ben's name alive.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We want to thank you for coming, our Zoom audience. We appreciate you for participating and supporting the Brooklyn William Mackey Jr. History Club. Give yourself a big hand. Thank you very much. We're going to take a quick picture right now. If anybody wants to take a quick picture with Dr.